Okay, interview with Linda Farrell at Paul Jolly's house in Luton. It's the 24th of June 2023. Linda, can I start off by asking you a bit about your personal background? Where were you born?
I was born in Luton.
Where in Luton?
I was born in St Mary's Hospital, which is in Dunstable Road.
And who are your parents?
My parents were Hilda, Gladys and Ernest, although I never knew my father really. He left when I was 3 months old.
Wow, that must have been quite difficult for your mother. What did she do?
Well, the house they lived in, she lived with her sister and her mother. So I lived in a house with 3 women. I was brought up by women.
So what happened? What was the story with your father?
I don't really know. My mother wouldn't really tell me. If I tried to ask anything about him, she just said, oh, she didn't tell me much about him at all. He just got up and left when I was 3 months old, that's all I know. Yeah, in retrospect, I think it's quite a heavy thing really, but at the time I was just a kid and, you know, didn't think too much about it. But then I did get a stepfather when I was 7, whose name I took on. So I was born Sales, but then became valet at the age of 7.
Mm-hmm. And what, in terms of what your family did for a living?
I think my birth father, if you like, worked at the Daily Mirror. I think he may have been a printer or something. My mother worked at Vauxhall when I was born, which was just very soon after the war. So I think Vauxhall was the main employer in town really. My aunt she'd been in the Land Army, and my grandmother didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Was it a happy childhood?
I think so, yeah. I quite enjoyed it. I was out most of the time. Played out loads, always out. I had 5 boys living next to me, so I was quite a tomboy. Used to go out and about. We used to really go out. Lived near Manor Road Park, which had the river running through it, so we'd wander up there. Always wandering, always. I used to walk up to quite a way really, a couple of miles up the big hill up to Stopsley Park, because it had bigger slides and things like that, which at the age of under 7 is something, with just 2 little girls walking up there with no parents or anything to go along. So quite a free and open childhood really there.
Mm-hmm. What year would that have been when you were
I was born in 46, and then so I was 7, I was 1953, and then we moved to what my mother described as a mansion, which was a 3-bedroomed council house in Stopsley, because the house I was born in was a 2 up, 2 down, outside toilet, no hot water, no inside bathroom, no bathroom, anything like that within that house. So moving to a 3-bedroom council house on an estate was just like a palace.
Right, very special then. What about school? Where did you go to school?
Early on I went to Surrey Street infant school. Paul Jolly actually went to the same school at me at the same time. But anyway, then I went to Stopsley Junior School at the age of 7. And it was a good school, Stopsley Junior School. A lot of people went to Stopsley School that have sort of, I don't know, a lot of people I know, even though I wasn't there. But yeah, they taught French in that school, which is very unusual for a junior school to teach French, and that helped a lot. At the age of 10 I was, when I took my 11 plus, because my birthday's in August, So I would have been 11 in August, but you took your 11 plus before the end of the school year.
And did you pass?
I did pass my 11 plus. I remember my teacher saying to me, "That's really good, Linda, because not many people who come from the council estates pass their 11 plus." But yeah, I did pass my 11 plus.
So they still had grammar schools?
They had 2 grammar schools in Luton, one for girls and one for boys. It was about 3 miles away in the town. So it was not 3 miles as the crow flies, so I didn't get a free bus ride. So we didn't have a lot of money, so I used to walk. It was quite a walk, but it was through the park that's near here, just walk down through parks mainly. Few flashes on the way, which sort of seems to be inevitable. And and then I went to a grammar school.
And did you find you had a particular bent to any particular areas of
I was good at sports. I'd always been good at sports, but I was very out of place in a grammar school, class-wise, I suppose, because it was mainly middle-class people that went there. Their parents were giving them a lift to school. They could all afford the uniform. They didn't have cardboard in their shoes when their shoes ran out. I kept up with the work okay, but one of the things I do remember was, because I used to be in a dance group when I was little, doing a lot of performing and dance and acrobats. And I was still doing that when I went to that school. But the drama there was totally different. It was Shakespeare, who I'd never heard of. In my upbringing, we didn't do Shakespeare at school, and we didn't have any books at home. And it wasn't something, I'm not aware of it, I may have done, but I'd never read any Shakespeare, so it didn't come naturally to me. But I did it, and I learnt the lines and performed in the plays, because I quite enjoyed that. I was often in a position, the school would vote for their house captain, and I was always being put in charge, not by the teachers, to the teachers' dismay, but the other kids in the class.
So you're quite popular?
I was popular, yeah. I think my sports made me popular, and I think my behaviour made me popular. I was perhaps a little naughty.
Okay, so the kids like you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, where was the dance class, just for interest?
Oh, it was just in Luton there, and it was, I forget the man's name who ran it, but we used to go and perform in old people's homes and homes, and I used to wear little sparkly costumes and do acrobatics, things like that. I was a good acrobat. He did want me to go to stage school when I was 13. My mother refused to let me go. She just said, "You can't go there, he's just a dirty old man." So I didn't go there, and I stayed on at school.
Right. Did you stay till 18?
No, I didn't. When you went to grammar school, you had to do 5 years in grammar school, whereas ordinary secondary school, as it was called then, was 4 years. But I had to do 5 years. Their best hope for me, they felt, was to be a games mistress, or, because I was good at sport. But they then decided that maybe I should leave that school, and because I couldn't leave, they would transfer me to the college in Park Square in Luton, which is now the university, but then it was a technical college, so they transferred me there. I would have been 14, I suppose, and I went there to do like a secretarial course, because that was the best hope for someone like me. I was good at English, I was good at arithmetic, I could write well, all of that. So I went there, and there was an art school at that college, and my life just changed. I went to the art school. I spent most of my time there, either modelling or just getting to know the people. I still did my class, but it just was very...
So that was a really positive move for you. I'm just interested though,
Yes,
when it first happened, did you feel you were being kind of judged and...
No, not really. I didn't like the school. I never felt that, you know, it wasn't... I had one really good friend there, but not a lot. So I didn't mind going there at all. It just seemed like an adventure and I loved it. And it was so different from a girls' grammar school, which was really strict and harsh and uniform and didn't suit me at all. And the college was wonderful.
So what sort of age were you when that...
I was 14 when I went there, 14,
what
15.
year would that have been?
46, 56.
So a quick bit of maths.
1960, I
right.
believe, yes.
Okay, so the 60s are about to...
Yes, and the
December.
art school was fantastic because it was like full of painters, not people who'd had to pass exams and graphics and pass exams to get there, just crazy beatnik type characters who painted, and the whole beatnik world was there, and I started reading beat poetry and looking at painting and going to the jazz club, which was in the TUC building over the road, and you know, it was just the whole thing, and I just thought, this is brilliant.
This was where you wanted to be.
Yeah, so yeah, that was where I wanted to be. So I did my shorthand and typing and was good at it. I went to the art school. I used to go to there was hairdressers there. I used to always be having my hair done mad in different things that they wanted to try out, so I'd try anything. I set up they didn't have like a common room or anywhere, so I took my record player in and took records in and started putting that on at lunchtime so we could dance, basically, because that's what I wanted to do, so I could show off when I was dancing, and it was lovely.
So you kind of created a common room effectively.
Yes, yeah, so that was good. So yes, that's what I did there and loved it. And then I had to go to work.
So that was at 16? Or
15 probably, yeah, 15, 16, yes, 15, 16.
So
To go to work.
where did you go to work?
I went to work for, I got a job in Hightown, in a tyre factory in Hightown, and I went there, and it was awful beyond belief. The men just treated me as if I was a thing. Every time I walked in, they just grabbed me, held me, pushed me against the wall, grabbing me, and I just couldn't. I stayed a week, and then me and my friend said, this was the girl I'd been at grammar school with, who was my friend Min, we're going to go and work in London. So we went to London, and we went to an employment agency. This is early 60s, I don't know, 62 maybe, so I'm not sure. But just went there and said, I can do this, I can do that. I'd been to grammar school, so that was, if you like, the fact that they know you can read and write and do that. So.
And however many words a minute.
Yes, and I could do that as well. So I went, they sent me for about 8 interviews, all different places, and my friend as well. We went, and I got offered all of the jobs that I went to. So did she. She went to different ones from me. She took one in publishing, and I took one in music promotion or band promotion. I worked in Dean Street in Shaw Film Studios building, and I worked for Don Arden. Don Arden was a music promoter agent. He's Sharon Osbourne's father, actually. but yeah, and we shared the office with the Solomons, who were boxing promoters. So I was in a showbiz environment when I was there in that office, and it was brilliant.
So the last thing you said was about Don on being in a, there was a boxing promoter in the same office, so you were kind of in showbiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was, yeah.
Okay. So what did it mean to you to be in that showbiz world in the early 60s then?
Oh, it was really exciting because lots of bands were coming up to Don and looking for an agent or whatever. And of course I was looking at these bands, the pictures that they were sending in, and this was like before the Beatles were really big and all of that, and he'd got a picture of this band. I said, look at these, Don, these are amazing, you know. Oh no, I don't want them, they're too scruffy. And it was the Rolling Stones, you know, that was there. No, I don't want that. So I said, well, I think they look amazing, you know, because it was right up my street, really, people who look like that. But then it was like, oh, there is this band, I wonder if you could go and see them and let me know your views. So it was like going, it was almost like a press pass to go, and it was the Kinks, so that was good to go and see the Kinks and to do that and to see what they, you know, how they went down and everything. So I really enjoyed that, like that sort of element of meeting these young bands that then people were all talking about, so I felt very much part of that scene.
And officially you were secretary within it?
Yeah, I was a secretary, and I was, you know, Girl Friday, I suppose I'd do, you know, go and get the salt beef sandwiches at lunchtime from the deli up the road. I was the only girl in the office. The office boy was Mickey Most, who some people will have heard of from those times. I think he went on to be a sort of radio DJ and what have you. And Don used to leave me different jobs to do that were quite crazy, like the time he gave me a briefcase to give to someone, and I did give the briefcase. Jean came in, I gave him the briefcase, and he opened it and said, "Where is it?" And Don had taken a gun out of it and asked me to hide it, which I did. And this was Jean Vincent, lost his temper, and it was when he had a stick and he was smashing all the office up and that. I don't know whether you could don't use this particularly, because who knows, but I know Don did get into trouble. Jean got into trouble a while after for threatening his wife at the airport, and I think he had a gun. But I didn't give him the gun. But the gun was there. It was quite scary, but it's also quite an interesting story, and beat the tyre factory in Hightown completely. It was exciting, and I like that sort of thing. So.
Excellent. And when did 33 come into your life?
Well, this was, at this point, we were then putting on promotions at the Royal Hotel, putting bands on and things like that, and doing that. And then we lost our place there because of change of landlords, so we had to find somewhere else to rehearse, because with the pub, the Royal, where we put the bands on, we had reciprocal, we could use the upstairs space to put shows on, to promote films, theatres, very, you know, avant-garde jazz musicians started to do shows there, and then we lost all of that, and there was the local arts council had a place down the road at 33 Guildford Street, and it was suggested we moved in there amongst all their sets and debris and dereliction and everything else, and we pushed the piano down the road, I think it was vaguely there, and it was about 76 and we settled in there. And then we set about with a group called Refleks, which was the name of the arts group that were working at that time. especially as they were pulling the Arndale down then, so there was loads of spaces to do impromptu art events, performance art as such, playing tennis in shops, and you know, the first carnival had come to town, so we would get a show together and did Scott of the Antarctic, where we were all dressed up in, you know, clothes and pulling sledges along in the sun. And Doctor Who's time machines and all sorts of things in the street, so a lot of street theatre.
So who are the other people? Who do you have?
The other people?
The people? Yeah. How do you find the groups to kind of make this?
Well, they were
with?
all together there. I mean, Paul, obviously, because that was Paul that I moved for and lived with at that time. There was a guy called Tim, Phil. Paul could probably help you more with the names of all these people, but there were different people doing a lot of stuff around this, and we then thought this should be an arts, we should do more with this, we can do it, and researching it and looking at money to start the project. It was called Luton Community Arts Trust, but it was known as 33 because it was at 33 Guildford Street. And it was, we set up a charity, we got money from Gulbenkian. There was money for 2 people. Paul at this time worked at the council. I was doing just odd jobs, keeping things together, and I kept on doing that, but then I was given a job because I'd got the finance know-how to keep accounts together and to keep that together, and I worked there with Tim. And between us we set it all up. Obviously Paul was involved in helping in this, but he did work for the council, but it was a tie-in to the council. And we raised the money, and then we were able to employ different people after a while. We employed but at first it was just me and Tim doing things, setting up spaces. One of the first things was a rehearsal room for bands to rehearse in, which we did with tyres, putting tyres, lining the walls and the floor with tyres and then building over them. Health and safety wasn't a big thing in those days.
So even the tyre factory, I was going to
there wasn't anything to do with that, no.
Of how,
but they could have come from there. I don't know. I've never put that together. No.
Parts of your life are feeding into this, like working with the accountants and then working with the bands in London and so on. And
that all
of this comes together.
Came together. Yeah.
And the performance.
It's really hard. The performance. I can't remember the first theatre show we did there. We had the Pop's Lemon cabaret show, but we also, the theatre show was the fabulous Random Band theatre show, and we put on in-house and with also the people that came to workshops. I mean, people like Spike came along to a show. Spike was doing workshops there, but then he went off to go to college and to further his drama. I think he did drama at college, and just people came in and out, but we just kept going. But anyone who came in, we utilised their skills, so they were part of the team until we could then employ extra people, get more money from the Arts Council, or Eastern Arts as it was then, and get money from them.
Did you find them supportive? Was it quite relatively easy to get money?
We didn't get any money locally, so yes and no. It was easier earlier on because they were freer. Eastern Arts, the people and the officers that worked for Eastern Arts were much more akin to artists in their own right. They knew their subject. So if they were a film officer, they'd made films or something. They knew that, and they had a knowledge of it. They weren't just bureaucrats who'd got a job and didn't have any feel for what they were doing. So it did make things easier. But as it went on, it got more and more difficult with more and more restrictions being put on. Paul was very good. Paul came to work there in, I can't be absolutely sure of the date, but it was when Channel 4 took an interest in the film side of it, and we needed someone to work with the money that they put in to further the film side. So I think, although Paul could obviously, if you interview him, could tell you more about this, but he took on that role, so then he was there. And Paul was very good at writing funding applications, and I'd work out the finance for it, so we worked very well together as a team throughout the whole time that we were there doing that, really.
I was going to say, so Eastern Arts, but also the council, I mean, in the 70s it feels like there was much more of an agenda of, you know, spreading out arts provision across the country, making sure somewhere like Luton had decent provision.
Well, maybe, but the only arts provision that Eastern Arts or the Arts Council provided help to was us, as far as I'm aware, at that point. Although we were spreading out. I mean, this is a whole big story to tell in this interview of all the different places we were going. I'm trying to look at it very tightly.
So we've had a short pause to reflect on how it's gone so far. And you were saying that at a certain point, possibly early 80s, 82, that Eastern Arts began making demands that you were more organised in your structures.
Yeah, I think it was probably a bit later than that, but I think Tim had left by this point, and we'd got an administrator and other members of staff. I think Paul had come in by the time that Eastern Arts, I believe, was a bit later, probably 85. I can't be sure, but I've got a feeling it was. They said, right, you need a structure, we need someone in charge. And that was their thing, someone's got to be in charge. Well, there was no way we could advertise, well, I suppose that has to be advertised, but they said someone has to be in charge, so we need a director of this. Paul was company secretary, so part of the trustee team. He was company secretary because he didn't work there at first when that was set up, so he could be in that position. And the staff all sort of worked on a collective, if you like, where everybody who worked there was getting the same sort of money, whatever they were doing there.
What sort of money were we talking at that point?
I don't know. I mean, the most I ever earned up until that point was $5,000 a year, and that was full-time, very full-time work. But it was in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. But Eastern Arts said that had got to happen. We couldn't do it. They sent someone in. They got everybody together and said, somebody here has to be in charge. Somebody's in charge here, whether you know it or not. So they're going to...
Like it or not.
Yeah. Whether you like it or not, or know it or not, someone's in charge and we're going to find out who. And so they just asked everybody, who's in charge? If something goes wrong or you need something, or you know, who tells you what to do or who do you go to? And they just, I would say 75% said Muddie, apart from Paul, he probably didn't say that.
Sorry.
But the staffing, I think it was because the staffing, there were more people working for the company at that time.
Yeah.
So it was getting bigger and bigger.
There's about 12 people working there then.
Yeah, so it was before the Community Arts Group, which was then 30 people
Yeah.
at some point.
Okay, so obviously in an interview properly, you kind of chiming in. It happens with a few interviews if someone ends up being there, you don't chime in from the sidelines, which is why you end up with multiple interviews, and sometimes they're going to contradict each other, and that's fine, and that's how you build.
That was my fault. I said apart from Paul,
fine.
of course,
Yeah.
I just threw it aside. I hadn't once looked over there up until that point.
No,
But yeah, anyway, that was the conclusion of that I was in charge. Did I want to be the director? I had to think about it. It didn't become all that easy. I think go back to school, I was used to being put in charge when I didn't particularly want to be, but it just always seemed the way that it was. So I became the director.
So being the team captain
Yeah,
came into play later.
Yeah.
Again. Right.
Although as a woman it wasn't still easy because the outside world didn't see it as such. How could a woman be in charge of this place? That's a man's job.
How did that play out? Did people come in and ask to see the boss?
Oh yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, on regular
And I told them I was the boss. Unless I didn't want to be, then I'd go and find somebody else and let them deal with it, because I didn't want to deal with them.
And did they bring in pay differentials at this point? Were you getting more than other people?
I can't remember. I think we must have done at some point bring in pay differentials. I do remember at one point I was earning 7,000 a year. It's lots of money. I don't think in my whole working life there, right up until even now until I was there, that ever really earned more than £16,000 a year. So it wasn't a big paying job. It wasn't one you went into to earn money. It was because we liked it. Although it was tough at times with all different things come into play, it still, I think, as a job, to have something you really enjoyed doing for the majority of the time was brilliant. It made perhaps home life difficult and everything else with it, but definitely I would recommend it.
I wanted to ask a bit about how the home life and the work life fitted together and so on, because there's some projects I know where the kids would hang out there and there'd be a children's kind of activities
yeah,
as well.
they did. The two of the kids came to classes there. Claire and Charlie both did drama, film making. Teresa not so much.
Yeah. So taking on that responsibility, was that becoming the director, was that a relief or was it a burden in some ways, or a bit of each? I mean, you know, because often you have organisations where the reality is that one person is in charge, and it's a recognition that makes it easier.
I did find it a bit of a burden, but as I've been so used to me and Paul were working together as a team through running it, that I don't think it made that much difference in that respect, because we both knew what we were good at in terms of the way that we organised things. And I suppose it was always knowing you'd got someone to lean on and to rely on, and the staff were good. Caroline was good administrator that would always do things. I had a really good caretaker who was always there looking after the bands and things like that came at night. He was brilliant, and he actually lived there, although probably wasn't really supposed to, but he did, because we did have dressing rooms upstairs in the theatre, so we'd got showers and all that sort of thing. So yeah.
So, second interview
Hello.
with Linda Farrell on 8th of April 2024. So we're going to pick up talking about the work of 33 and the various things that you programmed, starting with some of the early years. What are some of your early memories of working in this space and what was happening?
There was a few different things happening. People were coming in and asking about, could they do this here or could they do that here, which we accommodated to some, and I can go into more of to those there. But in-house, with the group of people who had virtually started the whole concept, which was the Refleks Art Group as such, a lot of those all kept together, and although they weren't all paid staff there as such, they were together as a group, and they formed a theatre company which was called the Fabulous Random Band, because it was very random. We did work on a script, we would work on it together to get the idea from it and then carry it through. We worked with a team of local builders as such who'd helped to renovate the building. They would help to build sets. Like one play was set in an aircraft, so we built, the whole theatre was an aircraft. We had portholes, down the side for the round windows with lights, so that when you had takeoff, you'd have a speaker underneath all the seats that would vibrate, so everybody would shake and the lights would go and you would be in a plane. And you'd show a movie in the plane, and one of the movies we chose was the one with Ronald Reagan in, where he's there because it was relevant at the time, and it would get hijacked and then there'd be a whole thing, and it would just be just a wonderful show. I can't go to describe every show, but that was called Journey to the Centre of the World, and that came from a book that a local person had written, but it was...
Who was that?
I can't remember, it was a Lord somebody or other. Can anybody else, can you remember, Paul?
No, he was a member, he was in the House of Lords.
Yeah, and he said that all alien came from the centre at the core of the earth. It wasn't from outer space, it was from the core of the earth. But don't mess with this stuff, because it will all go wrong. You mustn't play about with it. It's not, it's serious. And interestingly enough, we had quite a few mishaps throughout this production.
Like what?
Well, a lot of the photographs that were taken never came out, whereas other times we had no problems with photographs, they hadn't come out. An explosion went wrong, somebody had to be rushed to hospital. We're trying things out, things that we'd done before, but this time they weren't working so well. But we got through the show. We had guns in the show from the thing, and somebody got hit with a gun, and a handbag got searched, and there was a fight, and all sorts of this particular show was, we perhaps should have listened to it, but it was a great show, it was very good.
So who were some of the people involved?
I was the air hostess, obviously, because I was main girl in it. Paul was in it. Tim did the tech, Martin did the tech. A local mime artist called Ray Levine was in it. He was the one who searched someone's bag and got into trouble and hit me with the gun, got a bit too excessive. The main arts officer of the council came to see it, so he was obviously the target of most things, especially from my point of view. I would give a sign to the tech person for some turbulence so I could spill drink over him, or, that sort of thing. But
so they're basically, the audience is sitting in the body of the plane.
Oh yeah, they're passengers on the plane.
And it's an environmental piece, so it's happening all around them, and as if
and they're in it, so that, when you go up and down the aisles, it's the audience you're dealing with, not the cast. The cast was quite small, really. I mean, when we all had to get out, taking them down a fire escape was falling apart, really, and your whole audience, and a bomb goes off in the doorway as the last one leaves, so that, the plane's blowing up, and they're all run down to the street, and outside there's a guy in trunks playing the accordion, Welcome to Reykjavik, because you were going up to the North Pole. That was, to the centre of the earth, sort of thing. So it was all that type of thing, in a way. We did loads of shows. Some were totally
Can I just
improvised.
ask, so did anyone direct it, or did you just kind of put the whole thing together yourselves?
I wouldn't say there was a definite director. I don't know. Paul, do you?
No, I mean, it was tech run, so
the choreography was was a tech
Yeah.
side of it. So
And you
people
decided
responded to that.
things
Yeah, it
together.
was improvised.
Yeah. You knew where you were going with it, but you didn't know what you were going to
Perfect logic.
say. Yeah, but and of course then you'd got the audience as well coming in, and different things would happen, and you'd just play it. And we did an awful lot of shows like that. We've got the scripts for them somewhere because we've interviewed somebody who kept all the scripts, so that's done. So they're all there. We had automatic pilots on planes called George, because they are called that, aren't they? And badges made and all different sorts of things.
And what was the audience response like?
Very good. They loved it, especially a lot of the tech stuff. We had one show called It Shrank from the Blue Lagoon, or I think it was something to do with the Blue Lagoon. Black Lagoon, that's right. And it was really, my part in that was really being very silly about the way actresses were always casting those sort of things with, swimsuits on and doing their makeup and all of that sort of stuff. You've just landed and I have to make sure I look all right and everything. Got a bit of stick from some of the feminists in there, but I said, I'm just making a point. I mean, I realise it's silly, but I think one of the best bits of tech in that was the fact that we had a piece of polythene across the front of the stage area, that when we landed on the planet and we were going to get into the lagoon for a swim, a reel of polythene was hoisted up from the tech box and it had water in it. So it really looked then, from the audience point of view, as if you were in a pool and they could see through it. And so you'd move about inside it and all the water was dripping down the front. And it was, very tech. It was really tech-based before you had any digital help or anything. You couldn't impose this with cameras or anything. It was all built with props.
And who devised those?
Well, mainly Tim and Martin, really, I would say, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Martin,
the tech side of it.
Martin Green was very good on the tech side of it, yeah.
And where did all these people come from? They were local? Had they?
Yeah, local. They were all Luton people. We all lived in Luton.
And they trained in drama, or they just they're just making it up?
I don't think anyone trained in drama. Not in that early time, no. I'd done a bit of dance as younger and acted in a few, just as a kid, but nothing. Nobody had really trained in drama. That was in the Fabulous Random Band anyway. I mean, Spike trained in drama, but he wasn't in that. That was I don't know whether it was before his time or when he was at college.
Oh, I saw them, yeah.
Oh, you saw them.
And
You saw them.
Don't forget, we had Dave Rappaport as well.
Yeah, Dave Rappaport was in some of them. I don't know if you know who Dave Rappaport is. Time Bandits and there he the first show we did actually, called the Viennese Cupboardry Show, which was about Freud, is it? Yeah. So we had the psychiatry bench, and it was and Ray Levine played the part in that, and people just came out of cupboards every so often and did their bit. But of course there was a sideboard there, so at the end Dave jumped out of the sideboard, which that was quite surprising for the audience because they couldn't have thought anybody could have got in this sideboard, but they weren't expecting that. So that sort of thing. I know it sounds silly and I haven't got it all right, but it was very enjoyable. And what also we did in terms of the cast of different things, we would have theatre workshops that different people ran. I think Spike might have run one. Different people do theatre workshops, and just a general audience who'd come along. We'd always find a part for some of them in these plays as well, so that you'd got that just different people apart from our group who performed in it. And
so with these pieces, you were working in this art centre that you've refurbished and you had some money to do that, a little bit of funding. About £60 is what we said.
Well, £60 was to do it up. This was much later. There might have been a little bit from the council then, but I'm not sure. Mainly it would have come from Eastern Arts.
Right.
Eastern Arts funded us mainly, and this is probably then before all of the stuff came in about the staffing structure, because we got money from Eastern Arts.
Right.
And it was before Eastern Arts had a major, everything changed in a way.
So people were paid a little bit on an equal basis.
Alongside the fabulous Random Band, I think it might even been before, the similar group of people, there was the Pops Lemon Band, which was much more of a cabaret musical side of it than the fabulous Random Band, which was a theatre show. Pops Lemon was a band, but it also put on like cabaret shows, so people would just do a turn in it, and we had it set up like a club upstairs in the theatre, so you've got tables and chairs. We couldn't sell drink at this point, so to sell things we'd have the maitre d', which was Paul, and I was the waitress, so Paul could order me about and tell me to do things and get on with it and be bossy, which he quite liked. And I would go around with my little waitress outfit on and take orders for drinks and say, we've got, you buy a lottery ticket, and if you win, you can win a drink of your choice. You can have a lager or a beer, and so people would go, oh yes, and they'd buy lottery tickets, and I'd go off and come back, you're very lucky, you've won, and everyone would then get their drink and get in and watch the various acts. I mean, obviously, if I got to know a table quite well and realised that they were friendly and they were doing it, I'd go up and come back and go, I'm so sorry you didn't win that time. I just couldn't believe it, but it's all right. The acts that were on, Paul was Kevin Keegan. He did a sort of Sabutio type game and would throw people out who shouted at him as if he was a big referee and blowing a whistle, because he looked like Kevin Keegan with his curly hair and his shorts on and everything, and had a Sabutio thing in front of him. I did a magic act with a guy called Louis. He was the great Lorenzo and I was Lucretia. And we had a strong man, that was Tim. He tore telephone directories in half. Martin did, he put plastic bags over his head until he couldn't breathe anymore, would fall over and then get up, take the bag off and go, did I do it? Which obviously he did. That sort of thing. Very before its time when I look at some of the mad comedy that came after that, but we were doing this way before we'd seen anything like it in a way. And again, the audience loved it, and different people, if they could do things.
And how much did people pay to come to shows?
50p, £1, maybe. Some of our tickets are ludicrous when we look at it, because people have sent tickets in that we've got on the thing, which is like the price is just unrealistic compared to today. But
so how many people?
The theatre shows we'd run for a couple of weeks and put them on about 6-8 times or something, because obviously with such a small audience, and they were popular. They
How many
were
people?
sold out. We could, I suppose, with everything, we probably could seat about 40, maybe 30 or 40 upstairs. We did have the world's smallest theatre for a while in Guinness Book of Records till someone built another one. I think it was classed as the smallest theatre held together with gaffer tape because it was basically everything was gaffer taped.
And you were being paid, and
I was being paid, and mainly to run the centre. So I was doing all the accounts and everything, and the wages and all of that, and the admin.
And the technical people being paid, and
I don't think Martin was Martin on the books. I don't think he was.
So other people
initially, it was just me and Tim.
Right. And then other people are doing it for love and...
Yeah, we had someone in the kitchen who was paid, and then when we got money for an administrator, which helped, but they weren't doing the shows as such. Caroline never did a show as things. It was mainly the people who were there at the beginning from Refleks and people coming from the theatre workshops who were doing the performance, and the band was the band.
So people were rehearsing in the evenings with day jobs, or how did it work?
We'd rehearse, yeah, I suppose so. I can't remember really. I mean, a lot of people were there. They were at college, like Gary. He played a part in the theatre shows, and he was at the local college, so he'd come in as and when he could, and he wasn't being paid, but he wanted to do it. So you had all of that going on. That was mainly where people were. I don't think there was anyone who had a real full-time job who came in and just did it in the evenings. They were all involved in some way. If you think any differently, Paul.
Oh yeah, no, it's big. I don't.
And
so what I want to ask you is how long did it take for it to become kind of recognised locally, build an audience, people say, oh, that new place that's opened up. How did that happen? Did you have marketing, publicity campaigns, or did you learn on the job?
We learnt on the job, definitely. We put things on, we'd advertise it in whichever way we could, flyers and things. It was word of mouth. People had come in to do something, get involved in a workshop, they'd tell people, and then if you've got the community involved in some way and someone then they bring their friends, then they realise they like it, so then they'd come again. I mean, we did films, we put films on, we had a film club, and people who like films come. This was all done in the same space as the theatre upstairs at this point. The theatre shows were done on the top floor. Mm-hmm. And films, we had two projectors, two 16mm projectors, and or we'd show different art films or, different films as such, like the Man Ray film or black and white films. At that point, we had a solid fuel stove in the basement, which was like 3 flights down, basement, ground floor, first floor, second floor, third floor. So lots of stairs, because we had no lift or anything. So during the films, if it was just me and Tim doing it, we'd be running the 2 projectors. And at the crossover point, you had to see a little mark on the screen and then change the projector. At that point, the other one would run downstairs and stoke the boiler up because it was freezing and you had to put actual coal on the boiler and then come up again. That's why we kept so fit. So we had all of the film club going. There were so many different things, different types of music being played that it appealed to people, and it was word of mouth got round. So I think most of your community who liked to do stuff came there at that time, really. And also the cafe was open during the day. People would come in just for coffee. You'd got visual art exhibitions going on in the cafe, so that the painting community liked it. You'd got the films, you'd got the theatre workshops.
So in terms of the exhibitions, would you have someone come in and say, can I put my stuff, and they'd show it to you and you'd make that decision? Or? Yeah.
We didn't turn a lot down, really. I mean, most people were doing it, and you realise that, it made me realise how much talent there was in the town and within, a working class community as such. Not everybody was, but mainly it was that just ordinary people coming in who wanted to do things and liked the fact that they could. There was people had come in and want to try all different things. One guy came in, he wanted to do martial arts. He hadn't done he did a bit. He wanted somewhere to carry out a martial arts class. Well, I mean, the rooms were really small and everything, but, well, let's, give it a go.
So what space would he have used then?
He'd have probably used what was classed as the green room, I think, at that point. No, he must have used the theatre again.
Yeah,
upstairs.
And the downstairs performance
And
space.
the downstairs performance space. Yeah, because the downstairs performance space didn't have fixed seating. Upstairs, in the theatre cinema space, we had proper cinema chairs, like in
Where did you acquire those from? Do you remember?
an old cinema, I suppose.
An old cinema, I think, through contacts with Eastern Arts. Film East, I think it was called down there.
So they were supportive also in other ways apart from money. They were kind of helping you out.
One of the shows where we had the space show in the lagoon. The space costumes came from the fire department at Luton Airport because they all wore silver big suits. So we had those and different. We just asked different people, and in those days you just used to be able to do that. And I think a lot of people started up their classes and workshops there. So I say the martial arts, he came in, he started up, got it going, and he still does it now years and years later. A dance class, Keep Fit. The person who did that got a dance group together from it, a women's dance group, and we got shows together. When the main leader of that left, she couldn't do it anymore because she was having a baby. Someone else came in and ran it for a little while.
And did those people get paid for running the classes?
I think she did it. No, Leela didn't when she was doing it, but I think some people got paid for maybe doing a short residency, like Bronwyn Geddes. She came in and did that, and I think she probably got paid some. But she started off with a sort of exhibition type thing, I believe, as opposed to just dance. But I remember working with Bronwyn on Wuthering Heights. She did a dance adaptation of Wuthering Heights. It was very controversial. I directed it, I didn't perform in it. The costumes we made between us.
Why was it controversial?
It wasn't anything like Wuthering Heights, I would say. It really was an adaptation. There was a lot of swearing. We toured it, and if people came expecting to see anything that really resembled Wuthering Heights, they were probably disappointed.
Where did you tour it to?
Well, we did it in the local college. We actually did it in Harlow, and Harlow Theatre, and various other places, but it was a very, it was a weird show. I don't know if you know Bronwyn Geddes at all. But,
Not especially, but I know the name. Yeah.
So all of these things branched out from a member of the local community asking, could they try something out? And most of it grew, and different things came from it. It furthered their careers, but it also brought other people in. And when other people came in, it gave a basis, I suppose, to ask for money for certain types of projects, to bring people in to run them.
And did people also pay 50p for a class or things like that?
Yeah, they pay a little bit to come to a Keep Fit class or something, which went into the coffers, and like within the dance and workshops, that would help to pay if you put a show on, which we did, because we had women against, we were called the Wands, Women Are Nearly Dancers, Women Against Nuclear Dumping. There was a big nuclear dumping thing in Bedfordshire, which we did a lot of work on that.
When would that have been?
Don't know. I've got no idea.
Right.
When the nuclear dumping was, it was at Elstow.
80s probably.
Yeah,
probably.
The agitprop days.
Yeah. So there was a lot of that agitprop stuff going on.
Excellent. I'm going to jump about. Sorry if I keep harping on the economics, but I think it's really important because to know how this was, who this was supporting and who was supporting it and so forth.
Well, I mean, at some point we were obviously employing about 12 people. I can't give you exactly what jobs there was, but I know that it's 4 point. There was 12 people on the books. They weren't all getting exactly the same then, because there was, I think, a difference between part-time and that. So that was when Eastern Arts, who were funding us, came in and said we need a structure. We can't any longer fund what they classed as a collective. They needed somebody to, the buck stops here sort of thing. It's your problem to make sure that that we know who to talk to.
And prior to that, were you constituted as a company limited by guarantee?
Yeah, we constituted in 1978. We got the a charity, but we were limited by guarantee.
And also a charity?
Yeah, charitable status.
Charitable status, Luton Community Arts Trust Limited, and we were limited by that guarantee. And we found trustees, different members of the community, a chairman and different people, and that's when Paul came in as company secretary, because he didn't actually work there then. He worked for Luton Borough Council at that time. Mm-hmm. So he came in and became company secretary. So in terms of early on, because Paul was involved in all the shows and everything, me and Paul worked together on it. So that was one of the things. Paul was working quite hard on the Arts Centre, but he didn't actually officially work there.
Mm-hmm. So how long, when you became constituted, how long had you been going at that point then?
Well, this was it. We became constituted in 78. We moved into the building in 76.
Right. So
but we were running the events in the Royal Hotel before then. So some of the early stuff that people speak about would be early 70s as well, with Refleks and that group. But the Luton Community Arts Trust, not many people knew it was called that. They just called it 33. But actually 33, it was Luton Community Arts Trust. Mm-hmm. 33 because that was the address of Guildford Street. And that's what we then, when we finally got a bar, we had to form a trading arm, because as a charity we weren't allowed to do that. So we had to get a licence and so I applied for the licence. They didn't want me to. They thought as a woman I wouldn't be able to, but Paul couldn't, so I did.
They being who?
The
licensing authorities.
The authorities, actually.
Licensee authorities, solicitor or whatever, that they'd be less likely to give it to a woman at that time. But it had to be me. So so we got the licence, and so to do that we had to form a trading arm. So we called the trading arm 33 RPM, because that was like the 33 records of that time, and the 33 could stand for recording, promotion, music, anything you liked within Excellent. There. And that was limited as well, and that became our trading arm. So that had a separate account, and that was, from that is where 33 records came. So main 33 records and all of that.
So their profits went back into the main charity.
Yes. So we still have those two accounts now. Mm-hmm. So although the archive is being funded through Luton Community Arts Trust, 33 records, because it's just come to that really, 33 records is still under the auspices of the trust, because it's our trading arm and we share of the same VAT number.
So you had to kind of find your way through all of these things as you went along.
I mean, no training in it, apart from when I was young. I worked for an accountant, which he taught me a bit, and I did work as a bookkeeper for various firms. I was working as a bookkeeper when I first went into 33. I had a job working for it as a bookkeeper.
And how did the cafe work? Did they actually make meals? And
Yeah, it was a vegetarian cafe, first vegetarian cafe in Luton, and probably the only one for ages. That interested some people, and they came in. Lots of different people ran it over the time. I'm not quite sure how, I can't remember whether they were on the payroll or whether they took money. I really can't remember now how it all worked.
Well,
But
the main ones did take money, didn't they? They worked on a profit share
right,
situation and took some money.
okay,
so the profits came back into the
yeah.
Community Arts Trust.
Yeah, we had a kitchen. By this time we built a kitchen. We built a kitchen where the boilers were downstairs. Yeah.
And this is with the help of your friendly builders again?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a dumb waiter as well.
Yeah, we had a dumbwaiter
Excellent.
that we built. Yeah. Yeah, it was, and we did proper, food as well, veggie meals. I mean, at some point it was just cups of tea and cake, but it soon went on to, meals and everything. It was a cafe. I mean, there were whole different health and safety rules in those days. You wouldn't do it now. You wouldn't get away with the situation in which we dealt. But we never had any real problems. The worst ones were when we did theatre shows, and that was the one I spoke about earlier. But apart from that, there weren't any real accidents or anything. The soundproof room was made soundproof with rubber tyres in between the walls, and that made it soundproof. And all the art exhibitions. I mean, we had insurance for things. I kept the insurance going for everything. When we took over the next door, we actually then got disabled access.
So when was that?
It's got to be early 80s, I suppose. I think it's got to be sometime in the 80s. I did look this up the other day and I can't remember now.
But what was the building next door that you took over?
It was he sold coal.
Yeah, the coal merchant.
He was a coal merchant, that's it. He was a coal merchant, and so that gave us more space. So then we actually had a lot more space, and we were able to put disabled toilets in, and a ramp to, so that wheelchairs could come in. They couldn't get past the ground floor, but at least they could come into the ground floor, and we were doing more performances on the ground floor. Some theatre performances on the ground floor. The people show often did shows on the ground floor, but mainly the music was all on the ground floor, so that was made more accessible to everybody, because the jazz club was there, the jazz workshops on a Sunday, and the folk club was there, and the bands, they rehearsed on the first floor.
So you
but band performances were on the ground floor.
And when you took over the coal merchants, did you get additional spaces upstairs as well?
Yes, that's where our dark room was built. Up there, we had a bit of a dark room in the other space at the front, but we were able to build a much bigger dark room up there, which gave that space, and also access to the courtyard, which gave us parking. Not a lot of parking, but it enabled, like Vanessa Redgrave's chauffeur-driven car to come in, or it could. At one point we had an old ambulance that we used to go about in and do stuff, or the black cab that I had, taxi cab that I had for inflatables. At least it gave us a side to come in and out. And we built the sound recording studio down there at the back of the thing, and the river ran down the bottom, which was you could then see access to the river, which was tiny, but the People Show managed to make use of it and have dead bodies in it.
I want to hear more about these shows in a minute. And we've also got inflatables and all sorts of things. But on the top floor next to the theatre, were you able to expand the space? Or
I think it wasn't as high as that. I think the theatre stood on its own, didn't it?
The theatre was on its own. The other one was 2 stories.
Yeah, that's right. The theatre was just there, so you couldn't go over there at all, which was a bit of a shame. But
the front space was the gallery.
Yeah.
Became of the new building.
And the film and video workshop was there as well, which enabled that, because obviously in those days you couldn't have a little space to do your video work. You had to have huge machines and big reel-to-reel tapes going along, so it needed quite a lot of space to do that in. So that enabled all those things to grow by taking on next door.
Excellent.
And
going back just to the marketing, press, publicity side, were the local press supportive of what you were doing generally?
The local press was supportive, local radio was supportive, even television to some extent. I think we'd had Anglia Television might have been, but no, the radio definitely. We used to do different interviews on radio, advertising different projects. I remember doing one for the Solidarity about that, because there must have been somebody from, it was Poland, wasn't it, Solidarity?
Uh-huh.
And what was his name? I can't remember now.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul did a lot of interviews on radio, and people listened to local radio more then, I suppose. And different DJs from local radio would start doing little gigs there. Like there was the man Zeke, who was very much a big name in the West Indian radio stations. He got very involved and would do shows there, and so there was always, again, it was that, I could do a show there then, could I, or would you come and do a night there, and that sort of thing, just to pull in people who worked on radio and to do that and get them in there.
So I just wanted to also ask, so in terms of your print media, did you have a printer you went to? Because some places ended up being print shops as well in that period, as a way of kind of...
We had some form of... Did we ever do... We did do some... Derek did some, didn't he?
Yeah, we used to do a lot of silk screening.
Silk screening.
Then we had one of those original rolling machines that used to print out stuff. What we called them.
Bander.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we did have a local printer that would print up things. I forget what he was called now, but there was a certain company that would do stuff for us reasonable. When I look back over some of the publicity, it's quite lovely really, it's quite good, especially a lot of the black and white stuff that was done, printed out.
The people in the group designed that? Or?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was all designed in-house. We didn't, somebody could do it or would do it, or, there'd be people with those skills to do those, and I just made sure that the money was always there for it and it could be covered, because one of the things that I never wanted to do was to go into deficit to give people any reason for complaint about the fact that their money wasn't being used properly, so I very carefully kept it out of going into deficit ever. So I was tight. Yeah. You can't have any money for that. No, I wasn't.
So initially had come, Refleks at the pub, and then the fabulous Random Band in situ. At what point did you start bringing in companies from outside?
I think companies had come in. The People Show had already we'd got connections with the People Show via Paul with the People Band. So Mike Viggis was part of the People Band and People Show. So we've got those connections. I think Mark Long had a tentative connection with Luton because I think his grandma lived there. And Mark Long was a big part of the People Show. So they had that thing. So they came in. They actually, the first show they did in Luton was at the Royal. So they were involved before, and it was when they came to, when we had 33, and they said, yeah, we could do something here. I think that really helped us to realise what could be done. So I think them doing that enabled us to realise that we could put on that sort of show within those confines and take it away from the actual traditional theatre space that needed wings and things like that, which obviously we didn't have.
No, Tim, sorry, I was just going to say that Tim mentioned in his interview how influential Mike Viggis was.
Yes.
Because Mike looked at the space and said, oh yeah, this would work. So that was early days, you know.
So they were coming in, creating happenings, environments, as opposed to touring a set, and then they started to do something similar.
Well, they actually, it was before they had their own space in, where is their space, Bethnal Green?
It was in Bethnal Green, yeah.
Yeah, before they had that space, they would use our space to rehearse in. Mm-hmm. Even their huge shows, they did a lot of the actual work at 33, didn't they? Sorting it out.
Some of the ICA shows they did.
Yeah, the ICA show they did there. And then it would become huge when it went on tour, but it did start there, and they would do that. And they do workshops with local sixth form and everything. They were very influential in with us as to working there, and we were able to use that knowledge, their philosophy and style, and give it our own touch to it, and involve the local community in it, thereby, you know, everybody learns off somebody, don't they, at some point. I mean, I think the People Show, there were people before them that taught them. I'm thinking particularly of one guy whose name won't come to me now, but...
Well, there was all the Jeff Nuttall connection.
Yeah, Jeff Nuttall, that's all of that, which
So did
was shared, but it brought it to Luton as well, you see, so that was good, but that was mainly because of Paul's connection with the People Band, I think, that did that. And obviously things like that, then people who'd come in, like Spike, would then get very involved in like the People Show and get involved in it, and it probably broadened Spike's thought of theatre, which would have been different from what he'd been learning anywhere else, and probably changed the way he's looked at it throughout his life. It did it to all of us, really.
So did Jeff Nuttall come to Luton to
I don't think so, no.
Just he was his influence.
Yeah, I think he might have done the Royal.
He may have done a very early on at the Royal. The Royal had some incredible people who did come there.
Tell me more
musicians.
about that.
I don't think I'm the best person to tell you, but I mean, in terms of jazz superstars, Paul probably say this at this point, and he's probably the better one to talk about that than me, because that's what Paul's really knowledgeable about, and I'm not so much.
But People Show, what do you remember of their shows, either at the Royal? Which one stood out for you, or the work that they did?
Well, the one that was, I can't remember their names, the one that was at the ICA, they did there. Spike.
There was 79A was the Dentist Show.
Oh, the Dentist Show.
Known as the Dentist Show.
Yes.
So that you can talk about the dentist chair being drilled into the...
They had to
it doesn't matter about the names, it's kind of, what...
Yeah, they had to drill the dentist chair into the floor upstairs. Was it upstairs?
Yeah, they plumbed it in, actually.
They plumbed it in to do dentistry, and another one I really remember was the Mad Hatter, which was it was a murder show. It was about there'd been a murderer in Luton, so they actually adapted that for Luton, and that's where outside there was a dead body floating in the river, an inflatable in the river, and that's when they had artificial snow coming in, and all the audience were outside in snowstorms and everything, and then they had to walk in, and they walked past the exhibition space, which had Victorian, because it's set in Victorian times, it had Victorian machinists making things dressed in costume there as they went past, and one of those was murdered. Paul played the Mad Hatter, and I think he got hung with a paper bag over his head. It went upstairs into dance. Jose did mad dance acts which involved a local dance group and other people. That was a big one of theirs. Another fantastic one which they used the kitchen. So our local chef, John Harper at that time, made curry. This was downstairs, and they it was a narrow room, but they sectioned it in half with a curtain. I think they probably did a bit of, I don't know, but I know that the main bit of it was when people went into the space, they were the people's show would put them on this side or that side, sit there, and they'd do a bit of a show or music or something, and then they draw the curtain. So if you were sitting that side, you got curry. If you were sitting that side, you got bread and water. And it was just random, and that was it. And it properly fed, so we got these people with bread.
On one side got poetry read to them, the other side got sections of Data Capital read to them. And then the audience would come back on different nights, hoping to be on the curry side. So they all charge the same price.
Yeah, there's...
Found some pictures of that.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So they basically created the work to fit in the space.
Yeah, yes.
The space that was Luton and also the space that was 33.
Yes.
Mad Hatters was a site-specific show commissioned by 33, and they were there. This was 1990, and I think it was December. So it was very cold when they took the audience outside, but and I was involved in that. But lots of local people were involved, but they also did workshops outside of that.
Yeah.
So there was a commission to do workshops as part of it. So it was very much a 33 combined with the people shows.
Yeah.
So in that way, it was very prestigious, because that kind of cemented the relationship between the two organisations. So
I think we did part of the people show exhibition there as well, didn't we? When they had a lot of people who'd worked with them in the past, photographs of people.
Yeah, they did part of their archive there.
Yeah, they did had part of their
big archive show
archive
that they
displayed there.
Mm-hmm. And who was it? Eastern Arts again that funded you to do that?
Eastern Arts were the main funders for everything there. It did change quite considerably once the whole ethos of the funders and the way Eastern Arts were. You could see it in the officers early on in there. The officers who were like the film officer or the music officer or that all knew their subject. They'd all sort of worked in it or knew it. So that if you were talking about film, then John Cannon, I think what's his name? Knew about film and music. Martin?
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah.
Ayres, wasn't it?
Yeah, knew about music. And then slowly over the years that changed, and it would be somebody who'd not actually been a practitioner or really worked in that at all, didn't really know it. It was all much more by the book and ticking boxes, which hadn't been done before. It'd been done on whether, like the setting up of the first video workshop or the film thing, which is when Paul came in to actually work there. had to we had to apply as making films to get a commission to find independent filmmakers throughout the country, and the commission was coming from Channel 4, and we weren't really taken seriously because a lot of the people applying for this were well-known film organisations around the country, whereas film was a small part of what we did. But I think that the film officer at Eastern Arts was very influential in helping us and talking to the thing about these people can do this. And I made a film, somebody spoke about it the other day, well I didn't make it, I was in it, and that was about the Falklands. So it must have been round about this time. It was the Falklands War, and I did a film up and down the street marching wind-up penguins about dressed as an army sergeant, and little things like that. That was part, I think, the main video person at that time, Gavin Hodge, he said that was quite influential, those sort of things, in getting us that contract to give us that money, wasn't it? Just those sort of things. And that changed over the years with funding. Not, you know, the fact that you could do it wasn't, you had to tick boxes. And I think that started with, you know, we can't give you any more money unless we see a structure, and, you know, it has to be that. I'm not saying that it was just the whole change of everything that went on within funding. Eventually, Luton Borough Council did come to fund us. Right. I think they realised that we were doing a job that they weren't, and they decided to fund us. And at some point, it went from nothing till, I think they were probably giving us 100,000 a year to fund that in, and that
was that down to the Conservatives, you said?
That was a Conservative-headed council at that point, and they gave us. We got money from them. We had to apply for it, but I think it was that they were fulfilling our obligation at an arm's length policy for 1/10 of the price that it would have cost them if they'd have run it themselves and tried to put things on, because they wouldn't have had any goodwill or volunteers and people that make things happen and the public going in and supporting it, which was shown once we were stopped, and the new Labour Council set up their own place, and they didn't want us to have anything to do with it, and no one ever went there because everybody had supported 33, so they weren't going to this new place, and they didn't.
I found a petition the other day for you.
Did you? Yeah. So.
And you said that you were at that point seen as the middle class elite.
Yeah, we were obviously the revolutionary Reds and a bunch of hippies or whatever they like to call us down there, and but the Tories saw that as a sort of benefit. It was, you know, get on with it, I suppose. Labour Party came in, and we were the middle class elite overnight, which was quite upsetting really, because I'd always been sort of Labour Party and hadn't thought about those implications. And the people who were then councillors had been friends. We used to drink with them in the pub, and that had just turned against us. It was quite bizarre in a way. I mean, I remember having a meeting with one of them at a lunchtime, on a Sunday lunchtime, and he came in about an hour late to the meeting, and we'd all turned up there, you know. And oh, sorry, I got held up. I said, "Oh, you've been down the drill hall, haven't you, at your bar? How dare you say that?" Because I used to joke with him all the time, and then all of a sudden it was different. And he said something once that really showed me where this was all coming from. Was when they were talking about this new place which is now the Hat Factory, which we'd identified as being a good place as a centre. We had all the plans drawn up for it, but anyway. I had a meeting and said, can you just keep one arts thing in there? I said a dance space. You know, there's a big open space, well, it was all open space, a big open space on the top. Make a lovely dance studio. And at least if you have a dance studio, all the different communities in Luton can do dance there. There's no restriction on anything in terms of dance. So because you've got all your different communities there and everything, and I just felt from the knowledge and my background that it would be a good thing to do. He said, I don't see the point of that. I said, well, I mean, he said, I mean, grown-ups aren't going to want to do dance. I mean, if they've not got a career in dance by the time they're adults, they never are going to, are they? So what's the point? So and I went, oh, I didn't realise. So you going to badminton classes and that means that you want to be in the Olympics, do you, Dave? I don't think I should have said that, but I couldn't resist it.
Yeah.
I mean, he understood the concept of grown-ups doing sports as a hobby, but not dance. And it was that mentality that it just got lost. I mean, by this time we'd already set up, by the time the funding was drying up when they got in, we had to look for more funding. So I took an aspect of one of the things that we were doing that fitted the criteria of different funding streams. And there was a company called Luton Dunstable Partnership. And they were giving funding to community groups in certain things. So I looked at one of the photography projects that we were doing, which was called Social Narcotics Awareness Project. It was looking at different people with different drug issues and bringing them together, doing creative work and using photography for different images and things around that. So it's set up as Paul and I worked on getting an application together to get funding for that from the Luton Dunstable Partnership, and called it the Social Needs Awareness Project, because it's still SNAP, which then covered more than just a drug. It would be all sorts of different social needs with young people, housing, jobs, everything, but always kept the drug and alcohol there and got funding from drug and alcohol partnerships within that to run this project. And that was run from 33 and quite successfully. And then when we moved, we took that with us when we finally went into the hat factory, and took that with us. We carried it on, but it was never the same. We never reached the same type of people, the hard to reach young people that came into 33, because they had to come in to what was seen as a corporate building. When they walked into 33, they came in the cafe, they knew the people that run the cafe, they'd say hello and they'd come in and they'd feel part of the whole thing. Going into the hat factory, you couldn't get past the door until you signed in. Oh yeah, we have to sign in to come in here. They're not going to sign in. That particular group of people, they would sign, but it would not, Mickey Mouse signatures. And of course, eventually that puts people coming in. So it had to work with specific groups that made people come in more. You never really got that grassroots back. And I think in terms of the SNAP project, that was one of the main differences that I noticed, particularly about not being in control of your own building and being housed in what was seen as a corporate authoritarian place. Although we weren't, once they were inside our organisation, the freedom was there. But
I want to come back to the move
okay.
in a little while. I just wanted to ask you, so Luton and Dunstable partnership, was that a sort of social issues based project, or did it have an arts remit at all?
No, it didn't have an arts remit. It was a social thing, and it was like just I suppose
It was funded through Europe, wasn't it? European Social Fund.
It was funded through the European Social Fund. That's right, and very much came in under the Labour government in terms of bringing that into Luton, and it had its own staff. That was managed by a woman as well, Sue. I can't remember her name.
Definitely Sue. So.
Yeah, it was Sue something, and I eventually joined that as on the board of that as a community, as opposed to coming from the corporations, and that I went in as a community, in the director of the Luton Dunstable Partnership.
So they're focused on drink and
No, that was SNAP's focused on that.
Right.
The rest of it was all different aspects.
so all sorts of different social problems.
All different things, not just social, just different organisations that they were a funding conduit for.
Okay, so did they fund you for any other?
No, we that was our only project that we
Yeah.
put under there, and we got reasonably funded to do that. I mean, I can't remember how much now, but and that's mainly what we were able to sustain in the hat factory. And so mainly that was the only project, once we went into the hat factory, that we could do from the whole of 33 was that, because we didn't have we did try. We put on some visual art exhibitions and bring some visual arts into our one space that we had, that was the ex-creche, I think, there at one point.
So all the lovely artworks around you, and then you're very bright, and it's very nice. Have something vivid to look at. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm going. So.
Okay. And I am. It's now refocused itself, haven't it? Video. Okay, that's good. Right. Okay, so we're going to go back on some things and go forward on others and so on. So
Okay.
we were talking in the break about Community Arts Trust teams set up, and also about Manpower Services Commissions. And does the one precede the other, the CAT teams?
The CAT teams were set up with Manpower Services. Once when looking at funding, what funding was available to do things, Manpower Services scheme, as such, Manpower Services Commission, I think it was called anyway, that was available to employ people to do projects. Mainly, I think a lot was looking at putting people on building projects and learning that. To apply for a community arts team was something very, very different.
And this
the
would have
Manpower
been
Services Commission.
Early 80s, probably, under Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, under Margaret Thatcher, early 80s, I would say. Spike would probably know, because he was part of it at one point.
And to take people off the dole queue, which was very long.
So we looked for community artists. Once I'd spoken enough to them to warrant the fact that one of their things was, how can it be evaluated? You know, if you're teaching a team of bricklayers, you can look at the quality of the wall, but community arts to them was just such a vague thing as to what it was going to do. And I said I was looking for people with different skills, different art skills, to build a team that could go out in the community and work on projects, so that they could look at what projects people had set up and what they were doing. So we were able, in the end they gave us the money, that's why I was able to employ a team. I can't remember exactly who the first team was. Fahim was part of the first team, I believe. He was young, just out of school from Marsh Farm, and he did photography there. He was involved in film.
Was he Asian?
Yeah, he was.
Name,
yeah, Fahim Qureshi. We called him Fame Qureshi. Wendy Flawn, who was a local, well, she was from Flitwick country, Bedfordshire country, but she was, I think she'd got a degree in, I think, set design, but she did painting as well, and she was very practical at building things. She was very shy when she came in for her interview. Her dad brought her. He painted a bit, Ron Flawn, and she was very quiet and shy, but I could see that she'd obviously keen on working and doing things, and had a real community feel to her to share her work with others. There was another woman called Irene, sorry. I'm not quite sure what her skill was. I just can't remember what her particular skill was, but she seemed to work within the team, although ultimately I think that was a mistake in there. I don't know her that well, and she could be very disruptive. Did you come along then, Spike? You didn't in that part of it, did you?
Andy Russell was in Fame's year.
Okay.
Wendy and Irene were in the second year, and I was in the third year of it.
Okay, yeah. So there was also a guy called Stuart Meager who came along, and he did a bit of music and stuff, and he went on to do weird things. So
there's people who've got skills that they're going to apply and create something in the community. Yeah. Was there a training element then for them, or supervision from you and others?
Well, there may have been then some things that we brought in, but mainly they just got on with it from help with anyone at 33 who could share it. That was the inflatable team that went round doing the workshops. They were part of that. Wendy very much building things, art in the park and everything. And we did one really big project using their skills, which was the burning down of Luton Town Hall.
Okay, I want to jog backwards a little bit at this point, because you'd mentioned the inflatable team, and we're also in the break talking a bit about these inflatables. When did you start doing those? Oh, and also I wanted to mention, we can come back to that, Gulbenkian, but the inflatables thing and going around in a taxi and so forth.
The inflatables started before that. Before we had a team. The inflatables started with Refleks, and we must have built the inflatables we built them at Marsh House in a shed.
Where's Marsh House now?
Marsh House is where the source of the Lee is. It's a suburb of Luton. It's in Luton, Leagrave, near Leagrave Station. Marsh Farm was originally a big farm. It was like the farmhouse, the house on the farm. It had been used. Paul had an office in there, and there was a hut, Nissen type hut there, which is where we built the inflatables.
So this belongs to the council and so forth?
It belonged to the council, yes. Again, another fairly run-down building. But it belonged to the council, and we built inflatables in there and worked on play schemes that were set up around there and used the inflatables for that. And I think at that time that's where we had the double-decker bus to go round, and it's just a form of transport really, which is a bit bizarre. We carried on with the inflatables. The main one that we built was a big yellow one, and we kept that with us, so when we were in 33 we still had it, so we would still take the inflatable out into the arts in the park and do it. And to carry it about, we had a taxi, a black cab, and we used to be able to carry it about in that.
How did you learn how to do inflatables or discover inflatables?
I have no idea. I mean, we'd obviously seen them.
The glue.
Yeah, it was the glue. No, I suppose I would imagine Martin was a big part of that as well in designing it, really, because Martin was part of that team, wasn't he?
But the ethos of the whole thing was learn by need. So if you wanted to do something, you learn how to do it.
Yeah, I think so.
And it sounds like you learned the hard way about the glue.
Yeah, I mean, the glue was quite, you know, it was before glue sniffing was a thing. I mean, we were stuck in this shed with no ventilation inside a bubble that we were gluing together and pumping air into and making sure it didn't, you know, therefore exposing ourselves to all sorts of fumes. It wasn't until you tried to come out that you realised how bad that was for you, really, and we should take it a bit easier, perhaps not. But as Paul said, it was a case of, we want inflatables, well, we'll build them then. And didn't have to follow a specification, but I mean, again, if there became a hole in it, we'd stick gaffer tape over it. I mean, gaffer tape is what kept us together, basically. We were a gaffer tape organisation.
And we also talked about the fact that these were effectively just big bouncy cushions, weren't they?
Yes, they weren't bouncy castles. They were just cushions, and they were they were secured by like guy ropes on the corners into the ground, so they couldn't blow away. And literally, the kids could either climb on them. If they were too small to climb on them, we'd throw it or lift the child on, but basically throwing him on. And you had at least 4 people standing round. Usually it was more, so if anyone looked like they were going to fall off or anything, you were there to catch them. This is when you know, it wasn't so bad to, you know, you could actually touch a child, and if it fell over you could put a plaster on its knee or something. I mean, that's why none of these things could happen now.
Yeah, so the rudimentary health and safety was having the 4 people around the outside.
That's
not,
it, really.
Not DBS checks and
no, there were no DBS
risk
checks there.
and all the rest of it.
Not in those days.
Yeah.
I can't remember any DBS checks.
No.
The first time I started doing DBS checks was when I got official funding for the SNAP team.
Right.
So we're working with. Just on the inflatable, should mention, we did make a specialist one that floated on the lake with people in, a really big one.
Inside it?
Yeah, I've got pictures of that.
Walking across the lake, it was a sausage-shaped one as opposed to a square cushion, and it just flopped out. People show like that one, didn't they?
Excellent. So, so that was. Were you taking those out to festivals and parties? And
Yeah, just community events. Arts in the Park. Arts in the Park was a big thing that we'd done. Just very, you know, that was our sort of, if you like, more traditional community art type thing of doing crazy events in the park, face painting, arts in the air where we had balloons and running down the hill of Pope's Meadow, which was a big hill, and trying to fly. Things like that, you know, all dressed up in crazy costumes, entertaining children and doing painting and drawing and making things in the park.
And at this point you were still effectively a collective, so...
I would say so, although obviously once you'd got your manpower team, then they were being paid by the manpower services, because before... I'm not then I can't remember, because initially when we started it was just 2 of us were paid about 5,000 a year each, and that money came from Gulbenkian. But and we were self-employed. Once they got these schemes underway, then I had to look, they had to be paid on, so I had to set up a PAYE scheme, and so that changed into then being, or you know, not self-employed but being employed. And I think that's when the waging structure changed slightly, because then you had to think of a different
it was more, I was going to say, when you were kind of operating more collectively, would it be like, hey, let's do art in the park, we could do this, throwing in all the various ideas, or were projects one person's notion, or
No,
How
I
did
think
things
it was
come about?
still a collective thing. You'd look at the skills of the people and what was going on and what was something that seemed to work or someone had said they'd like to do. It was really difficult to tell where each idea came from because we did have regular staff meetings and all talked together about what we could do. We'd look at what had worked or what people had asked for and then work around it. The only thing that was funded was the Manpower Services Scheme at that point, and they weren't funded to do any particular project. It was about using the skills of that team that best suited what projects we do. And, Arts in the Park and all of that was a big part of that. Wendy was very good at working with community groups, especially groups with special educational needs. And Wendy was brilliant at building giant puppets. So we did a lot of giant puppet work, which building the puppets itself was really good, the big whole frames for everything, paper mache, so that was another skill. And community groups would be building them, the groups that Wendy was working with. And all of the team would work with her as well, if that was the project that was going on. Because one of the big projects on that was the burning down of the town hall, and giant puppets were a big part of reenacting that particular event that Luton was quite famous for.
Okay, let's come on to that in a second. I just wanted to know, how far were you aware of other organisations, of the art centres, and kind of learning from each other or reading about other projects? To how far were you conscious of a movement, or was it much more locally focused, do you think, or a bit of each?
I don't think I wasn't really aware of many other centres like ours. I think that came a bit later when you'd got the custard factory in Birmingham, was it, I think, and things. But we got quite involved with Chris and Frankie, who were carnival workers, and they came down to do workshops with the carnival when Luton Carnival were putting it on. We didn't employ them, the council did. But some of their ideas as well, we got friendly with them and they got involved, so that was another aspect. I think they were from Norwich way originally, Chris and Frankie. I think they've gone to the Isle of Wight as well, haven't they?
I think there was an awareness of community arts movement.
Yeah.
But that was more on a kind of philosophical framework.
I don't remember really visiting any other actual community arts groups anywhere, although people did ask us about it, and therefore we would go to places and talk about community arts work. We went to Easter House in Scotland.
Scotland, yeah.
And talked about it.
Craig Miller.
Yeah,
Came
people
out.
were asking us as opposed to us going out and looking at other groups that were doing it, just to talk about the setting up of it, how we did it, how it, we made that crazy little film called CAC.
CAC.
Community Arts, I forget what the other bit was for it, but it was called CAC. And that was about showing what the Arts Centre had in it. And that was made with Wendy and Irene as two spacemen visiting Luton. It must have definitely been Thatcher time because they had handbags. They came into the Arts Centre and asked about it, and I showed them round and used like Star Trek beam me up thing to jump from room to room to show each room. I think that's something that maybe we're having digitally cleaned up, which might be quite interesting to look at, to show the inside of the Arts Centre. The theatre space and everything might come out well in that, I'm hoping.
It's interesting, a lot of the things that we were asked was not so much about the practicalities of work. It was about how to legitimise their work, because we'd had the experience of setting up a charitable trust with trustees, and which is quite early in that whole stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so what happened with the burning down of the town hall?
Well, it's a big story in Luton, obviously, in 1919, when people came back from the First World War. The dignitaries, the town dignitaries, decided to hold a big event celebrating the fact that people had come home. So we'll have a big party, and it started off in a big procession at Wardown Park, and it came along the Old Bedford Road past the Rabbit Pub, which was a well-known pub then, and was at the time, and then into the town hall for their celebrations, speeches and food. Except that no disabled people were allowed in, or could get in, and no women were allowed in. 1919. And of course, most of the disabled people had been disabled during the war, and women had done all the work at home during that war, so they got cross and they burnt it down. The women set fire to it, and when the firemen came, they cut their hoses so that they couldn't put it out. Nobody got hurt, I think everybody got out, but the town hall burnt to the ground.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we reenacted that story on Perks Meadow, opposite Wardown Park. We built a replica of the frontage of the old town hall, put all fireworks in it and everything, and had giant puppets in it doing the reenacting the things in it and everything that all part of the groups had made. So it's very much a huge community project, building the set and everything, and just reenacted it and set fire to it, and had all fireworks set in it, and it all just went off with a bang.
So was that sort of November the 5th type?
No,
or just separately?
It was summer.
Summer.
I don't know what date I don't know the actual date of the burning down of the town hall. I can't recall that, but it would be. It's a big historical thing. It's well known for it. It's always given Luton that element of a town of unconventional rioting people. Unruly mob.
Yeah. And so the women who were part of that and so on, had they been political before, do you think? Was that
what, in 1919?
Part of the struggle for the vote or anything of that kind?
They may have been. I don't know. I would guess so, but I wasn't made aware of it when reading up about it, because when you read about history, there's not a lot of her story in it, is there really?
Well, the women broke into the music shop, didn't they? And got the piano out.
They did, yes.
Played. There was a music shop near the town hall.
Farmers.
Farmers, that's right. And they pulled the piano out.
To save it?
No,
to play it.
Well, the town hall burnt down.
Play the old World War I songs.
It was Jackie's grandfather who was playing it.
Was it?
Fantastic.
It was July the 19th, so we would have probably done it around about that time.
Right, okay.
1919, yes.
Yeah, excellent. And did people go to prison for that?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know.
Well, I think they did.
I think they may have done.
Yeah, I think reading up again about it.
I'd have to look that up again. I mean, it was done again at another point, the burning down of the town hall. Luton Borough Council did it, but
39 people were arrested and dozens wounded.
Yeah, there you go. No one was killed though, were they? Don't think so.
No.
No one was burnt in the town hall, were they? All got out.
Yeah.
I think they got out, and then it was probably set fire to. I don't know.
Yeah, but many received serious sentences, and one was sentenced to 6 weeks of hard labour. It says.
Right.
Okay, right. So this sounds like it wasn't just a historical reenactment. There was a politics to it as well, to an extent.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we were. I wouldn't say we were. Everything was politically motivated that we did. Our shows weren't, were they? No. Particularly. apart from perhaps underlying things that we did without well, for me, I didn't feel of myself as any sort of political activist at all.
But there was a political angle to some.
Well, there was, but I think it wasn't my I'll be politically active in doing this at all. It was just, we were called benign anarchists, to be honest. That was how we were described, or would describe ourselves in a way.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure where this is in the timeline, but you talked about Vanessa Redgrave coming up to edit a film. This is when you got the film and TV
this
unit.
would have been really part of the film and videos thing, and it was there was obviously a lot of political stuff once the film and video group set up, because it was the miners' strike. They did an awful lot of work on the miners' strike. Vanessa Redgrave must have heard about the fact that I don't know whether it was during the Channel 4 funding, was it? As
No,
a
she
film
was
and
a
video
member of
group.
the Socialist Workers thing, wasn't she? One of those.
Workers' Revolutionary Party, I
That's
think.
right. Yeah.
And they used to hold meetings at our place. Just to we weren't running them, but they would like use a room to have a meeting in.
Yeah, and we used to have to hide that because under the charitable status we weren't allowed to be involved with any politics.
That's
So
right.
Just that was the
Yeah, so
only,
we weren't
in the
political.
background there was a lot of things that went on with the council. We had to tell them that this wasn't political.
The WEA used to have meetings there as well, whether they're political or not. They were just adult learning group, but
It was in 1988, and the WRP, Corinne and Vanessa Redgrave had sponsored a kind of a memorial plate or statue or something to be put up in Moscow in memory of the victims of Stalin, and this was all kind of allowed under that regime. But they'd held a memorial event in London, and with various of their friends, actor friends and stuff like that. But they'd had it videoed. Whether it was 33 who'd actually videoed it or not, I don't know. But she certainly used their facilities to edit it afterwards.
Yeah.
So this is where your story comes in.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think 33 filmed it. I think it was edited there. And she obviously realised that from whatever she did, that it'd be a good place to come and to be able to do that.
Mm.
And then she visited and
In a
chauffeur-driven car, and it parked out the back, and she went up to the video group, and I was downstairs, and I thought, oh, the chauffeur's sitting in the car, I'll go and invite him in for a cup of tea. We've got our cafe there, he doesn't need to sit in the car. So I went out, hello, and chatted to him. I said, why don't you come in and have a cup of tea? He said, I'm not allowed to. Vanessa doesn't like me to leave the car. I was horrified. I couldn't believe it. It was some sort of Rolls, I think.
It might have been a Rolls.
It's a really fancy car.
Mercedes, yeah. I think it's a Rolls.
I couldn't imagine anybody saying that to someone. You know, you've got to stay in the car. You know, you can't go in and have a cup of tea. I mean, that was
People thought Luton was a dodgy place. Yeah.
So you sat in the car, didn't you?
I sat in the car chatting to him. I don't know whether I took him a cup of tea.
I think you did.
Yeah.
I think you did, yeah.
I took him a cup of tea.
Right. I've got a whole list of different companies who performed at the space, and you don't have to kind of remember all of them, but I can talk about. You could talk about some of them that, and I can jog your memory on maybe some others if.
In terms of the theatre company, another one that springs to mind particularly is Fort Beard Fantasy. They did a lot of work there, their shows there, and they also did a residency in Luton because of their work there, and so were there for quite a while, and so we got quite close to work, so a lot of their shows were done there. Some of them fitted into the small space very well, especially their film stuff and their Briccioni brothers that they did. We're talking about the films and everything. That worked well there. So that we'd go downstairs for the Brittany brothers in the downstairs space, but upstairs for the films. So they worked in both spaces. Other groups that I remember because of I was working with the dance group a lot, so different people would come in and do workshops, and we'd take them round to colleges. So there was the Gambling Geysers, who worked with us. I think they did a show at 33, and then again they would go around to sixth form and other places and do workshops there with the groups that worked there. The other school they went to was Lee Manor, which was by Marsh Farm Estate. That had a good theatre and a good theatre teacher. So that was very good to put stuff on in there for the kids of Marsh Farm and Sixth Form College. There was Gambling Geysers, there was in Triplicate Mime, a company called Inside Out, and these were very much dance, physical and dance theatre companies and mime stuff, so it worked very well with what we were doing. It was good for our group and good for the outside groups.
So how would that work? They'd come and do a show and then do workshops, or sometimes do a work in progress and you then contributed? Or?
No, they'd usually have a show that they bring to us, and then we'd either the schools would pay for a workshop, or we got money from somewhere else. But I think the schools sometimes paid for workshops in their school. I think that's why I probably said Marsh Farm had a good theatre teacher, and so we would say, we've got this company, would you like them to come and do some work, and it'll cost this much. I think that's how that probably worked. I can't remember getting specific monies for them, although we may have had some money to pay them to come and do a show, because we obviously had a budget for performances.
Yeah.
But anything else would have been tried to work out with the good schools that were willing to pay a bit of money when schools could, for different things to happen. So obviously part of my job was to know which schools would be...
Build those relationships.
And build those relationships up.
And what about the local education authority? Did they support things?
Well, yeah, but that would be... a lot of it was left to the individual schools. I think the schools had their budgets and they would work it. And obviously Marsh House, no, it was called Lee Manor, the school, had a good theatre in it. It was a fairly modern school, had a good theatre in it, so that would have had... and I think Halliard was another one, and I think the teacher at Halliard he liked theatre, did a lot of amateur acting himself, and I just can't remember his name at the minute, but that would have been another school that we would have done work in. And it was really down to the individual people, and some of them may have come into 33 at some point and formed a relationship which made it easier to then... Or I would talk to the schools, and you'd soon know if anyone had a genuine interest in wanting their pupils to try something new, and so you'd build on it and make it work.
And you also had a show, at least one by Lumiere and Son, when they did Circus Lumiere, yes?
Yes. I don't remember that show so well, and I don't remember doing any further workshops with them, but we may have done. I don't know. Obviously, quite a name, Lumiere and Son, and the Circus Lumiere and everything.
And that took place in the park again? Or?
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Did, yeah.
Yeah, so they came to us as volunteers to act as stooges and also to help them put up the tent, because it was a proper, a medium-sized tent, but obviously it was an alternative adults kind of circus theatre show. But yeah, they came to us
to ask for help. I knew that it wasn't one that I'd gone out to get, so it must have been that way.
It was Howard who commissioned them.
Okay. Howard was the arts officer at the Borough Council. Yeah. So he was the last and a good arts officer at Luton Borough Council. Really, he was a good guy. Yeah. And
so, in terms of selecting work, did people come to you and send their leaflets and so on and suggest you booked them, or did you kind of...
No, some would. say, and you look at it and think, would it fit in? Was it in the budget? Would it, do a bit of research and see if it would work? So yeah, lots of different people did shows there. One man shows worked well, just in terms of people like Rob Inglis doing his sort of monologues, and that worked. And again,
Desperate Men, was that on your list?
Oh yes,
Desperate Men, yeah, they did stuff there as well.
Yeah.
I think it was a case of it got known on the circuit, like it did when we did comedy. You'd get known on the circuit, so comedians would talk to each other about Luton's a good place to go to try out that. And I think that worked with small theatre companies. Luton's a good place to go to try out that. And I think it was a sharing thing, that if they wanted to try an experiment or try a new show, it would be a good place to do it. The staff would be supportive to them, making sure they could put their show on, and the audience wouldn't be horribly critical in terms of if they weren't sure, because Luton audiences, people who came to 33, wanted to see what was on. It wasn't just of like going to the local theatre for a night and seeing what's happening. I think they came there mainly because they'd known it or tried it before, or word of mouth, and so it was quite, I suppose, supportive in that way, because a lot of the people who came had come for some reason or another maybe before, and so because it was small, if you're going to get an audience of 40, it's small, isn't it?
So there's an intimacy both in the space, but presumably the same people would come back, you'd chat to them.
Yeah.
It sounds like it wasn't an anonymous sort of a centre where you don't know the people who are running it. You're very much in a...
But you did get new people coming because of workshops and things. There's different people would come to a workshop and then they'd start to come to events and things. So it wasn't always exactly the same people. It did change over the years. And because we did young people's drama workshops as well. So you'd start with people who were at college or the end of school, and things would come in, and then they'd carry on coming as they got older, unless they went off to a university somewhere. But usually if they came back to the town, they'd always pop in.
And Matchbox Purveyors is another one.
Oh, I remember that name, but I can't remember why they came or what they did. I just remember the name. Matchbox Purveyors. They had some great names, theatre companies, didn't they?
Definitely. The Chuffinells.
Oh yeah, the Chuffinells, another great name. But there's so many theatre shows, I can't pick out ones exactly what they did that was there, because I don't think that you would know the Chuffinells.
3 working class women from Sheffield. Or...
Yeah, that's right.
You're talking about their working life and their industrial relations, all kinds of stuff, but it was also a musical and that. But they were very much, they'd started out of very much from an amateur basis, but it took off as a musical, and they came to do their anniversary show at 33. It went down really, really well.
Okay.
And Lady Christabel and her butler.
Lady Christabel and her butler, they used to come, especially they would do outdoor events. They'd come if we were doing part of a festival or carnival or something, an outdoor event, because they'd walk around, very much so around spaces, or going to a reception, they'd walk around, she all dressed in her finery with her wrinkled old scrotum, and the butler who would follow her around carrying a tray with drinks on. Yeah, she was great, Patty B. And she got to know the place. I don't know if they actually did any in-house shows, because they seemed to me more of street theatre type events. So if there were any festivals that needed street performers, whoever was doing it would ask us, and we'd look at perhaps people that we knew would be good for a piece of street theatre to go along with it. So some stuff may have been just for that, really.
Yeah, Art in the Park they did, I think.
Yeah.
So Art in the Park would have been organised by somebody else, but you supplied material, or is that your...
We didn't put... Did we put on Art in the Park?
No, I mean that was.
It was a council thing,
yeah,
wasn't it?
Howard, wasn't it? Did a lot of that.
Howard did it, yeah. And he would use us to... So, you know, he would have a budget for it and then use us. So we weren't going to the council to apply to do it. They'd have a budget and come to us, and we'd look at what we could do it for, costing materials, and if we were bringing somebody in outside of us, or, you know, so that it wasn't costing us in-house anything, but if we were bringing people in,
It's more like
there'd
a
be the budget.
commission.
Yeah. You would have to do that because you'd have to, you know, Art in the Park would have to have the authority of being able to use the park, which was from the Parks Department of Luton Borough Council, which is where Howard's office was. Howard's office was in Wardown Park.
Right. And you talked about Extemporary Dance Company.
Extemporary Dance Company, I don't think they ever did a show. They may have done a show at 33, but anyway, they came to us for some reason. They wanted to put a show on in Hemel, and they came to us as dancers to see if we would do put a show on there. So our dance company got a show together, and one of the shows we did there was about street girls, and it was a great show. But I think that they directed it, not us. We performed in it.
So you were a performer in that?
Yes.
So do you continue to perform throughout in the various companies, or?
No, only in the ones. I don't think I work with any other sort of professional companies as such, apart from doing a bit with some of, you know, no, not really. I can't remember. I may have done. I can't remember. But I did work with the ones mainly, but yeah, that was the last big show I did. I think that one. I love doing it though.
Excellent. And so you took that elsewhere, you said? No.
Well, we took it to Hemel. I don't think we took it anywhere else. I think it was just Hemel. The Extemporary must have been... I can't remember why Extemporary came to us and asked to do it. I do know that I've still got the Extemporary dance t-shirt.
So did you have a relationship with, say, Hemel as a
No,
neighbour?
not particularly.
Reasonably close arts centre?
Used to go to the... You know, if I'd go to see theatre sometimes outside, I might go to the Old Town Hall at Hemel to see shows, because again it was a smallish theatre, and put on the sort of stuff that I'd probably like as opposed to a big commercial show.
Mike Figgis, he was a regular.
Mike Figgis was somebody that Paul knew from way back in the 60s by working with the People Band. And Mike Figgis was with the People's Show. Mike Figgis came when we were at the Royal, because of Paul's connection with it. The People's Show did a show at the Royal pub, but upstairs had a performance space that we used in return for putting on shows downstairs, rock bands and things. And I believe Tim took him along to see 33 that we'd got use of, and Mike said, yes, you could put a show on here. And so that was a real, I think we got the idea that we could work in that space and perform.
Yeah, because we'd been looking at other buildings as well
at
that time, and I think Mike convinced Tim that building could work as a space.
Yeah, so they did a show there to show that it could be done, and they didn't have their own space at that time, so they did. They used our space as a workout, a rehearsal room basically to go through their stuff in. Luton's not too far from London; they could all get there quite easily, and they'd come down, and it was a space that they could have, that they weren't paying for, because obviously they were a benefit to us to do that, and in return they put on a workshop for a college or something, or And,
so when he did his own show, Slow Fade, or maybe there's others as well.
I don't remember Slow Fade, but if he did it there, I don't remember it. Spikewood, no?
There's no details on it, it's just a name.
I don't remember him doing it there.
Yeah.
He did do a one-man show, but I'm not sure it was called that.
I can't explain about it, but if he did, that would probably be within that thing to show, perhaps. But you needed to see all of it, the use of space as to how it could all be done, of all over the building.
Yeah, they were geniuses.
They were absolute magic at transforming spaces and doing things. They were all so good. And Emil, who was part of it, his father was an opera singer, and he said, so his father did a performance upstairs in the theatre with this great big opera voice in that tiny space. It was absolute magic. So just things like that, of sharing things and doing things and putting on a piece like that, which I don't think we'd put opera on before.
No, I mean, the one thing I remember with Emil, because Emil was a wonderful acrobat.
He was an acrobat,
and tumbler. And so we had to open all the doors on the top floor, so he had a long enough run up to run through, past the audience, and do a somersault at the end. Because this was all for a big show, but that's the only way for him to get the space there was to open all the doors. I always remember that.
Brilliant. There's a point at which there's a number of feminist companies who start performing dance on, and obviously we've mentioned the Chuffinells, but there's also Scarlet Theatre, Sensible Footwear, Spare Tire. Was this your doing? Were you becoming more and more conscious of that work? Or?
No, not really. I wasn't looking. Well, I suppose because we had the women's dance group, I perhaps was, but it's not in my mind. I got to put those on. But I think because once one had worked there, then again, like they would talk other feminist shows. That's a good place to work. I think that's the way the word got round, was that through the companies, that Luton was a good place to work because you would be helped. The staff would help get you get your set together. They would let you do everything to help and be friendly in a supportive environment. And I think that's what went round, why so many people approached us, because they weren't going to earn a lot of money from us with a capacity of 40. I mean, they knew we weren't going to have a big budget, because you don't. But again, I think it was a space, just another show somewhere to do their work to a new audience.
And you being a woman in charge, was that, do you think, a factor?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe some of them said something, but I think I just got so used to that sort of element. Personally, I didn't find it that odd at first that I was a woman in charge. It was other people who found it odd. I didn't think, I'm breaking barriers here, because I'd only been brought up by women, so I didn't know that men were in charge. I went to an all-girls school, there was no men's staff. I mean, men in charge, that was a ludicrous concept to me, so it didn't really matter.
But you talked about at the beginning coming up against other people.
Oh yeah, once I was in that position as a grown-up, I realised that it was unusual. But it didn't really matter.
Excellent. Now, so the 33 comes to an end and you are under pressure to move at a certain point. Can you talk through how that all came about? The
demise of... Well, it wasn't the demise of 33. There was elements that... There'd been a change of political power within the town. So instead of the Tories, we had the Labour Party come in. They weren't supportive of community arts. They didn't see arts as important. And to them we became the middle class elite, as opposed to sort of left-wing hippie types. We were suddenly middle class elite. There are a couple of things that made me realise how unsupportive of the arts they were when we were being closed down and they'd got a building that we'd actually originally wanted to set up a new arts centre. They'd put the blocks on it, because to have got £1 million from the Arts Council, which was the Arts Council, National Arts Council, were going to give us to build a centre, a new centre where we were in Guildford Street, which we would have actually loved to have done and would have been brilliant to do. We needed 25 years tenure because that space was owned by Luton Borough Council. We needed 25 years tenure to make it worthwhile for the Arts Council to give that space.
And this was the Hat Factory?
No, this was 33.
Right.
This was 33. Originally we wanted to build the new space on our site.
Yeah, because the building was becoming dilapidated.
Right.
So
Very
we needed money
dilapidated.
spent on it. So the idea was we had architects draw up plans for the space. The Arts Council on their side. And as
The
Ron
money,
said,
25 years.
all we needed was agreement with the council that they would stay there for 25 years.
They wouldn't give it to us. They refused point blank to give us 25 years tenure. 25 years later, the space was an empty dump infested by rats. That's all I can say. It was pure spite. They didn't want us doing it. They wanted to do it. When we couldn't get that, we looked at moving into another space, trying again and seeing if we could keep the Arts Council's money to develop a further space, and that space we identified then as the Hat Factory. It was an actual working hat factory then, because Paul and I went round it looking at it when it was an original hat factory, and it had loads of great big open spaces in it, you know, big open spaces, and the downstairs was beautiful. The reception, you know, it was old, it was all wood panelled with stained glass, you know.
Is this 19th century building?
Yeah, it was, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it just had like, just almost like Snugs. It was almost like that pub in Belfast, which had got the panelling and glass panels and all of that in this, as you first went in. I suppose it was their reception area for the hat factory and all the building around. So we looked at that. We got architect plans drawn up for that. We had a friendly architect on our council, on our trustees. So he drew up the plans for that, and we looked at all the different aspects that we'd like. It was either having a cafe on the top floor with glass so you could look out over Luton, because Luton's in the valley, and if you were up high, there's quite a lot of countryside around and views, and thought that might be quite nice up there, and different aspects. Anyway, that wasn't to be either, so the council took that over, and when we're still at 33, I had a meeting with one of the guys who, you know, I said, please, if you're not going to use it as an art centre, just keep one good space there that could be used. Say, you know, one of the big open spaces on the top for a dance studio, because other things can be done in dance studios if you wanted to rehearse or, you know, a play or something, but for a dance studio, because it fitted any culture. All cultures do dance, basically. You know, majority of them have some dance form that they do, so it could be used by everybody in the town. And the council was very, you know, dismissive of that as a concept. Why on earth would an adult want to do dance? Surely if they're not a known dancer by the time they're grown up, there's no point. And I reacted with, well, Dave, I don't understand. You play badminton and are you striving to be in the Olympics or something then? It didn't go down well. I should have shut up. I should have been better. But I don't think it would have made any difference anyway, really. But it just showed me their attitude that, again, it was probably looked upon as girly or something.
So then you were still in 33 stuck
We
there?
were still in 33. We'd set up, we had a good photography project that had gone well, and then along came the Luton Dunstable Partnership, which was an organisation funded by the European Commission, I believe, and they were giving grants to local organisations to do projects. So we took our photography project called SNAP, Social Needs Awareness Project. Originally it was the Social Narcotics Awareness Project, but we changed it to social needs to be more inclusive as to not just one social need, but many. Paul and I put together an application, and we got the money for that, which allowed that project to be funded, and we moved that project into the hat factory when we first moved to the hat factory, which was then owned by Luton Borough Council, and they'd ripped all the lovely things out of that building. And we moved into that building, and we had a room on the small rooms, because all the big rooms they'd partitioned off into small rooms, because they wanted the Citizens Advice Bureau there and the Luton Tourist Office, or whatever they call it. Yes, in this huge building with all these big open spaces in the town centre.
So at this point 33 closed down?
Yes, 33 closed down.
And with it any programming of theatre and
yeah,
dance
everything,
and so on?
all stopped.
So how many people lost their jobs at that point?
Well, virtually all the people that was still left working there, but there was, you know, I carried on, and Paul carried on. We carried on working and doing the SNAP project.
What year
Paul was
that?
working for 33, there was the 33 records going at this point. We'd still got the trading arm, so the 33 jazz side of it was still going, so Paul mainly managed that.
And you kept staff from Snaps, they went to.
And the staff from SNAP, so that was who were running the SNAP scheme. That was
And did 33 RPM move into the hat factory as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
A lot of the stuff was stored there, and also the recording studio aspect. There was a recording studio. Well, no, it wasn't a recording studio in there. We built it, didn't we? It was built.
It was David.
Dave, someone, a guy who we knew who ran a recording studio next door, but one to us at 33. He was a recording.
Yeah, he was working with Van Morrison.
Yeah, he was Van Morrison's sound engineer, and he lived in Clarendon Road as well.
So, yeah.
And so that was what year when you moved in there?
2001.
Right. And so what happened next?
Well, we were in there running SNAP, but it was different. It was never going to attract. I mean, we tried to, because we tried to attract the same people, but the whole setup of coming from a friendly, community-led project to a place that was obviously led by the corporation and authority was just going to put anybody off of coming in. They'd come in, they'd have to sign in, and they'd be like scrutinised or looked at, you know, and they didn't like it, and eventually that hard to reach group remained hard to reach. And we did keep going, but we had to do more work in schools on aspiration and things like that.
We were based there until what, 2016 or something?
Yeah, we were there for a while, kept going. We after the Luton Drugs Partnership money finished, I got money from the Luton Drug and Alcohol Partnership to carry on doing the SNAP work, and then funding from the LLLA, which was the Luton Airport funding. So we got funding right up until the airport status then changed, and everything was then, all funds were being given to another community organisation in Luton that would then dole out the money to different community groups. And by that time we'd got to move out the hat factory, made it very difficult to apply to run workshops and things because we no longer had a space to run them in.
And you had
So
to move
fund
out
and finish,
because
basically.
you had to move out because
Renovation of the hat factory, and we didn't suit what the new director had in mind because we were messy. We did painting. We covered the walls in wrapping paper, basically, for people to paint and do different murals on. We held workshops in sculpture with things and different that we could in that space, but it was messy and she didn't like it. She wanted white pristine walls everywhere, and now it's the most soulless place imaginable they can go into, but she still gets all the money. Mind you, she's got a good salary.
Just to give you an idea of the timeline we're talking about, I just looked this up. The proposal for the redevelopment of 33 was way back in 1988.
Wow.
So
okay.
the time that then that fell through, and then finding the hat factory building
okay.
In the 90s, through to then eventually moving out of the building. So 35 was the first to go, and that was condemned. And then 33 was condemned, and then it was all pulled down eventually, as you say, and just left as an empty plot. And so you got, it was over a long period that kind of started to fall off, and yet so much was still going on, over that time.
It was, and that's where, as I said before, I think there was that professional element of how difficult, but the personal element became in because mine and Paul's relationship changed, and therefore we couldn't rely on each other, and I felt I'd got nobody to rely on at all within that, so I wasn't able to put that energy in to keep going. Mm-hmm. Because there was an element of I don't care so much now, and I think that's where the personal comes back in, that does affect the professional way that you work. It was, It
also must have been very demoralising to constantly be getting so little support from the council and having so little vision of what this
and
could
when
be
you
and had been.
Yeah. And when you haven't got that close support there at the same time to share it with, it was just too much, I think, to carry on, really.
So, how do you see it all now and so on? Is it?
I think I loved doing it. I think it was a great thing to do. It got me to know so many people. It totally changed my life. As apart from, obviously, it changed the lives of a lot of people who went through it. It wouldn't have been, without that, I don't know what I would have done without that, but it certainly changed me and gave me a good purpose and grounding to get on with something, and made me realise what I could actually achieve to what I'd been told as being a very naughty schoolgirl, that I actually was capable of doing quite a lot. So it taught me that. But I'm not a loner. I needed someone to work with and to, be a team. I've always been a team player as opposed to a loner.
Yeah.
And it just all got, it wasn't there in the same way. The team was at 33. Yeah. The team thing at the hat factory wasn't the same. So I couldn't, and also I suppose I was getting older. The energy of putting it into it is a different thing as well. I didn't have that quite in the same way. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was under 30 when it all started, and it's a long time.
But you've achieved this remarkable thing over those 30 odd years.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I feel so, and I'm very proud of it, and I really like it when people say nice things about it. The people I don't know suddenly go, "Oh, yeah, you're a legend." I think, "Oh, good." That's nice. I'm a legend. Someone told me the other night when I went to the Bear Club, "Oh, yeah, well, you're a legend." Oh, God, thank you very much. That's so daft.
Excellent.
And I get introduced when I went into bed. I went in on my own the other night, and I sat at this table with people I didn't know. So Carl decides to come up. Carl manages it, and the people he said, "Oh, this is Anne," and he says to Anne, whoever I was sitting at her table, and he says, "And this is the Duchess of White." It's a good job Paul wasn't there, because if Paul's there and someone says something like that, he makes
Bring it all back to reality.
But yeah, and that's quite nice to have that.
Excellent.
It was nice being chosen as Lutonian of the Year one year in 2011. I got my looks like a pointless trophy, from the television show, sort of, with Lutonian of the Year 2011.
And as her biggest fan, I should mention that you created Honeydew Roosevelt.
Oh, sorry, yes, we haven't asked about Honeydew Roosevelt.
Oh, Honeydew Roosevelt was my first cabaret character that I did. I sang country songs very badly, but I had I was a good performer, even though I couldn't really sing. Well, I couldn't sing, basically.
Dolly Parton with enlargements.
Yeah, I mean, I was, although I was quite a thin woman, I had big breasts, so I did Dolly Parton quite well. I had a blonde wig and a lime green evening dress thing, and did different songs. My favourite, I told you I loved you in 32 bars, but all you did was drink my beer. That was the one.
Excellent.
And I liked Don't Bring Lulu, that was another one. I didn't do that in the Dolly thing, but yeah, I did used to do a lot of cabaret singing. Apparently there is a film of me singing
Stormy Weather in the Shower.
Stormy Weather in the Shower.
Okay, excellent.
Singing is used advisedly.
With Paul Payne's saxophone.
I think that's probably a good point. So Linda Muddie, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Oh dear.
Well, that's
Brilliant.